What if I told you that one of the richest men in town made a bet and lost in a way he never imagined? In the world of millionaires, everything seems to be a big game. Luxury cars, exclusive parties, unlimited power, and easy conquests. But this time, Leonardo chose the wrong woman to play with. Camilla wasn't like the others. She wasn't impressed by money. She didn't fall for cheap games. And above all, she wasn't a prize to be won. But what began as a simple bet took an unexpected turn. Leonardo, the man who had everything, finally found something that money couldn't buy: true love. Now the question is, will he realize it before it's too late? Get ready for a story where the tables have turned. And this time, the heart rules. The sound of clashing glasses, loud laughter, and electronic music filled the luxurious atmosphere of the private club. Leonardo was reclining in a leather armchair, with a glass of whiskey in his hands and a confident smile on his face. Surrounded by friends as rich and bored as he was, the evening followed the same script as always. Empty conversations, stunning women trying to catch his eye, and trivial bets to make the monotony bearable. "Do you want to see something?" said Matthias, one of Leonardo's long-time friends, pointing to a woman on the other side of the room. "That one would never be interested in a guy like you." Leonardo arched an eyebrow, intrigued by the statement. When he followed his friend's gaze, he found Camilla. Unlike the women who used to frequent the place, she wore a simple uniform, balancing a tray full of drinks while deftly dodging the rushing customers. Her gaze was attentive, focused on her work, without showing the slightest interest in those around her. "I doubt it," Leonardo laughed, leaning back in his armchair. "Seriously, man, she's not like the others. You can try to impress her with your money, but she won't even look at you twice." A smile formed on Leonardo's lips. He loved a challenge. "I bet I can make her fall in love with me." Matthias laughed, accepting the bet. The game was up. That same evening, Leonardo found an excuse to get closer. When Camilla passed by his table, he purposely dropped a napkin on the floor. "Excuse me," he smiled when she bent down to pick it up. "Have you been working here long?" She stared at him for a brief second, showing no emotion. "A few months. Can I help you with anything?" "Maybe. I'm curious to know what such a beautiful woman does in a place like this." Camilla didn't reply immediately. The look she gave him was full of skepticism. "Work? That's what I do here. If nothing else, I have clients to attend to." She turned to leave, leaving Leonardo disconcerted. It wasn't the kind of response he got from a woman. Interest was growing. Over the next few days, he insisted. Every night, he found a way to get her to talk to him. He tried to impress her with generous tips, but she refused. He offered her a drink, but she politely declined. He began to realize that money and status meant nothing to Camilla. However, Leonardo was persistent. "If you give me a chance, I promise it will just be a conversation, no hidden intentions." Camilla hesitated. There was something different about this man, something she couldn't define. Against her initial instinct, she agreed to have a coffee with him after work. In the cafe, without the loud music and noise of the club, Leonardo noticed that the conversation flowed differently. Camilla talked about her dreams, about the difficulty of balancing work and studies, about her sick mother who needed care. She was strong, determined. She didn't want charity or empty promises. For the first time, Leonardo found himself really listening to someone. Camilla, on the other hand, began to see a side of Leonardo she hadn't expected. He asked genuine questions and seemed interested in her stories. Even so, she knew that men like him were dangerous, men who were used to getting everything they wanted and discarding it when they had had enough. But there was something in his eyes, something that made her hesitate to push him away completely. The bet, however, was still a secret, and Leonardo had no idea of the price he would pay for this game. Leonardo couldn't get Camilla out of his mind. At first, it was just a challenge, a bet to prove that she was still irresistible. But something about her intrigued him in a way he couldn't explain. The next morning, sitting at the breakfast table in his luxurious apartment, he found himself staring out of the window, lost in thought. His personal assistant entered the room, holding the day's agenda. "Mr. Leonardo, today you have a meeting with investors at 10, followed by a business lunch. In the evening, a charity event." He nodded mechanically, but his mind was elsewhere. In a simple coffee shop, with a woman who refused his advances, as if he were a random. At the end of the afternoon, he decided to arrange to see her again. This time, he didn't want it to be in the superficial atmosphere of the club. He went to the cafeteria where he knew she worked during the day and waited until her shift was over. When Camilla came out, she stopped in surprise to see him leaning against a sports car, wearing sunglasses and a mischievous smile. "Following me?" she asked, crossing her arms. "I just happened to pass by, but since we've met, can I offer you a ride?" She laughed, shaking her head. "And why would I accept? Because I have no ulterior motives. I just want to talk." She watched him for a moment before sighing. "That's fine. But no taking me to a fancy restaurant." He raised his hands in surrender. A few minutes later they stopped in a small park, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. They sat on a wooden bench, watching children playing in the playground. The silence between them was comfortable. "This place is beautiful," said Leonardo, trying to strike up a conversation. "I always come here when I need to think," replied Camilla. "It reminds me that there are simple and good things in the world." Leonardo remained silent. For him, nothing was simple. Everything involved business, status, and power. But Camilla saw life in a completely different way. "You don't like talking about yourself, do you?" she asked. "What do you want to know? Why would a guy like you who has everything be interested in a waitress?" The question took Leonardo by surprise. He opened his mouth to answer, but realized he had no real answer. Was it still just the bet, or was something deeper going on? "You're different," he said simply. She laughed, looking away. "What does that mean?" Leonardo gave her a lopsided smile. "It means I want to get to know you better." She sighed thoughtfully. "That's a problem." "Why is that?" "Because guys like you don't get girls like me." Leonardo frowned. "And what does that mean?" She looked him in the eye, seriously. "It means that I don't want to be a hobby for you, Leonardo." His name sounded different on her lips. For the first time in a long time, he felt the weight of his own intentions, but he still couldn't tell her the truth. Camilla stood up, putting her bag on her shoulder. "I've got to go. Can I see you again?" She hesitated before answering. "Maybe." And then she left. Leonardo stood there, watching her disappear down the street. For the first time, the billionaire began to wonder if he was playing a game he didn't know how to play. Leonardo had never had to wait for anyone. For as long as he could remember, everything he wanted came to him without the slightest effort. But Camilla was different. Not only did she challenge him, but she made him question his own intentions. What was once just a game now seemed like something bigger, more intense. Determined to see her again, he showed up at the cafeteria at the end of her shift. This time, without luxury cars or rehearsed poses. He sat at one of the counters and waited for her to notice him. When their eyes finally met, Camilla sighed, as if she had expected it. "You really don't give up, do you?" "Not when something really interests me." She crossed her arms, appraising him. "And what exactly is it that interests you?" Leonardo smiled, but it was sincere. "You." Camilla blinked a few times before shaking her head, holding back a smile. "All right, billionaire. If you want to talk, you have to do it properly." What do you mean?" "No fancy places, no expensive cars, just a conversation without beating about the bush." Leonardo wasn't sure how to react, but he accepted. He didn't understand why he was so willing to follow her rules, but there was something addictive about Camilla's honesty. They went to a nearby square, where they sat on a wooden bench. For the first time, Leonardo wasn't the center of attention. There, he was just another man, and that disconcerted him in a way he hadn't expected. "Have you always been rich?" she asked while playing with a loose thread on his jacket. My family has had money for generations. I grew up surrounded by luxury. And that never bothered you? Leonardo thought about the question. I never stopped to think about it. Camilla smiled. That means the answer is yes, but you're afraid to admit it. He laughed, shaking his head. Are you always like this? Like what? Straightforward. She shrugged. I don't like wasting time. Leonardo was silent for a moment. There was something intriguing about the way she approached life, different from everything he knew. What about you? He asked. Have you always lived like this? Yes. I grew up without many luxuries, but my mother always said that money doesn't buy character. Leonardo arched an eyebrow. And you think I don't have character? Camilla looked at him for a few seconds before answering. I don't think you've discovered who you really are yet. The phrase echoed in his mind long after the conversation had ended. Later that evening, as he gazed at the city skyline through the window of his apartment, Leonardo felt something new. Doubt. For the first time, he wondered if there was something missing in his life. Something that no amount of money could buy, but there was still a problem. The bet. And he had no idea how it would end. The days passed and Leonardo realized that his life no longer revolved around the same interests as before. The parties, the casual encounters, the million-dollar deals. Nothing seemed as interesting as the times when he was with Camilla. At first, he tried to convince himself that he was still in control. But the more time he spent with her, the more he realized that he wasn't the one running the game. He was involved, really involved, and that scared him. One cold Saturday afternoon, Leonardo showed up at the cafeteria by surprise. Camilla was surprised to see him come in, but she didn't show it. She just carried on serving the customers. Don't you get tired of coming here? She asked when she finally had a free minute. No, I don't. And don't you have something more interesting to do? Leonardo smiled. I don't think so. She bit her lip, trying to hide a smile. I'll be out of here in 20 minutes. He just nodded, waiting patiently for her to finish. When Camilla finally appeared, she pulled a scarf over her neck and looked at him curiously. What are we going to do? You choose. She thought for a moment before answering. Then follow me. Leonardo wasn't used to following anyone, but he did so without question. Camilla took him to a part of town he never visited. Narrow streets, local shops, a square full of families enjoying the day. For her, this was normal. To him, it seemed like another world. You've never walked around here, have you? I haven't, she laughed. I have. They went to a street stall where a man was selling popcorn. Camilla bought a bag and offered it to Leonardo, who took a handful with hesitation. You really have everything, but you haven't lived anything, have you? He chewed the popcorn thoughtfully. I don't think I've ever needed it. Camilla shook her head, amused. Well then, enjoy it. They sat by the fountain in the square, watching the children playing and the couples walking hand in hand. Leonardo had never done something so simple, and yet he felt more comfortable than he had ever felt at any millionaire's party. After a while, Camilla sighed. Leonardo, what do you want with me? The question caught him off guard. He looked at her, not knowing how to answer. I like you. She laughed lightly. You like the challenge. Leonardo frowned. It's not that. Camilla held his gaze for a few seconds. Then prove it. He didn't know how, but deep down, he knew he would do anything not to lose her. It was a cold night when Camilla received Leonardo's message. I want to see you. Can you go out for a while? She hesitated. She'd already given in more than she realized, allowed him to get closer than he should have. But deep down, something inside her wanted to believe that he was different. Minutes later, they met in front of the small building where Camilla lived. He was leaning against his car, without his usual arrogance, without the posture of a man used to getting everything. Hi, she said, crossing her arms against the cold. Hi. There was a brief silence before Leonardo stepped forward. Can I take you somewhere? She shook her head. I'd rather walk. Leonardo nodded and followed her down the dimly lit sidewalk. Camilla noticed that he was different. Less talkative, less sure of himself. "Are you all right?" she asked. He glanced at her briefly but looked away towards the street. "Yes, I was just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated. "How my life has changed since I met you." Camilla stopped walking. "Is that good or bad?" Leonardo stared into her eyes, as if looking for the answer there. "I still don't know." She smiled slightly. "At least it's sincere." They continued walking, the conversation flowing naturally. But unbeknownst to them, a storm was approaching. Later that evening, Leonardo received an unexpected call from Mateus. "Dude, we need to talk." There was something in his friend's voice that bothered him. "About what?" "The bet." Leonardo froze. "What about it?" She found out. The silence was overwhelming. "What?" Leonardo asked, his voice lower. "I told her at the club. Someone heard and told her. She's devastated, man." Leonardo felt a weight on his chest. Where is she?" "I don't know, but if I were you, I wouldn't waste any time." Without thinking twice, he grabbed his car keys and rushed out. He had to find her. He had to explain. When he finally found her, Camilla was sitting alone on a bench in the square, her eyes red with tears. He approached her slowly. "Camilla." She looked up, and the pain he saw in her eyes hit him like a punch. So it was true. Her voice was shaky. "Was it all a bet?" Leonardo felt despair rise in his throat. At first, yes, but then... "After what?" she interrupted. "Did you realize you could fool me for longer?" He shook his head. "No, I realized I was in love." Camilla laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "Do you think it makes any difference now?" He took a step forward, but she stepped back. "I swear, Camilla, I didn't know this was going to happen. I've never really fallen in love before." She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath before standing up. "The problem, Leonardo, is that I've never been a match." And then, without looking back, she left. And for the first time, Leonardo knew what it was like to lose something that really mattered. Leonardo had never felt such emptiness. He had always had everything he wanted. But now, it didn't matter how many cars he owned, how many luxurious penthouses he lived in, or how many women were willing to take the place Camilla had left. Nothing filled the hole that her loss had caused. For the first few days, he tried to deny the pain. He drank, went out with friends, surrounded himself with the artificial glitter of parties and the fake laughter of people who were only around him out of interest. But in the silence of the early hours of the morning, when he found himself alone in his huge bed, all he could think about was her, Camilla. The memory of her haunted him. The way she laughed at his attempts to impress her, how she rolled her eyes whenever he tried to appear superior, how her voice carried a sweetness that he had never found in anyone else. It was then that he realized he needed to change. Not to win her back, but because without her, he could no longer bear to be who he was. The next morning, ignoring emails and company commitments, he went to a place he never thought he'd set foot in without a selfish motive, the coffee shop where she worked. Camilla was behind the counter serving a customer, but stopped when she saw him enter. Her gaze immediately hardened. "What do you want, Leonardo?" she asked without emotion. He took a deep breath. "Just to talk." She laughed, shaking her head. "You've said all you need to. I've changed." She crossed her arms. "In a week?" He nodded. "Yes, because losing you made me see things I never wanted to see." Camilla watched him for a few seconds. "I don't want to hear speeches, Leonardo. Words are easy." He knew she was right. "Then give me a chance to prove it." She hesitated, but in the end she just sighed and went back to work. Leonardo left, but for the first time in his life, he didn't give up. Over the next few days, he began to show up frequently in her neighborhood. Not to insist on conversations, but to understand her life. He began to notice the people she helped, the neighbors she talked to, the way she dealt with everyday problems without getting down on herself. And, little by little, she began to take action. One of the first changes was to distance himself from his old friends. He knew that Mateus and the others didn't understand what was happening, and perhaps never would. But that didn't matter anymore. Then he went to his own company and made a decision that surprised everyone. He started investing in social projects. He created a program to help small businesses, encouraged educational projects, and for the first time used his money for something other than his own benefit. He didn't do it to impress her. He did it because he wanted to. Camilla knew about the changes before he even tried to tell her. The news that Leonardo was financing a community center reached her ears through neighbors. At first, she thought it was just another ploy to win her over, but as the days went by, she realized that it wasn't. He was different. He was different. But the doubt still remained. Would it be enough? A week later, when Leonardo passed the cafeteria again, Camilla took the initiative to call him. "Can I talk to you?" He nodded immediately, as if he had been waiting for this moment. They left together, walking through the same park where they had talked weeks before. "What do you want from me, Leonardo?" she asked bluntly. He took a deep breath. "I want to prove to you that I'm not that guy anymore." She looked him in the eye. "What if I never trust you again?" The silence stretched on for a few seconds before he answered. "Then I'll understand, but that won't change how I feel." Camilla looked thoughtfully at the trees. "Give me a break." Leonardo didn't insist. He just nodded. He had already waited a lifetime to find something real. He could wait a little longer. Time passed, but Leonardo didn't give up. Unlike the man he was before, he learned to respect Camilla's time and space. He didn't pressure her, try to rush feelings or convince her with empty promises. He just continued to be the best version of himself, without expecting anything in return. Camilla watched. Even without admitting it to herself, she noticed every little change. How he had given up parties and superficial friends. How he was now often seen in community projects. How his company was having a real impact on people's lives. And above all, how he no longer tried to impress her. That afternoon, sitting in his small apartment, she finally admitted to herself what she had known for some time. She still had feelings for him. Determined, she picked up the phone and sent a short message. "Can we talk?" Leonardo arrived quickly, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. When he saw her at the door, his eyes lit up in a different way. "Hi," he said, trying to hide his anxiety. "Hi," she replied, making way for him to enter. The silence that followed was dense, full of meaning, until finally, Camilla spoke. "You've really changed." Leonardo sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I had to lose you to realize who I was." She looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of the arrogance of the past, but all she found was sincerity. "I'm still afraid," she confessed. He took a step forward but didn't try to touch her. "I know that, and I'm not going to ask you to trust me again. I can only show you, day after day, that I will never make the same mistake again." Camilla's heart raced. She wanted to believe. She wanted to allow herself to feel again. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. Then, slowly, Camilla stepped forward, reducing the distance between them. Leonardo held his breath, waiting, respecting her rhythm. And then finally, Camilla made her decision. She touched his face gently, her eyes locked on his. "Just don't hurt me again." Leonardo held her hand against his face, closing his eyes for a moment. "Never again." And there, in that instant, what had begun as a bet became something real, something that no lie could destroy. They had found each other, and this time, it was for real.